Thanks, Megan. Sitting here in the studio where we just did our shows today, and we talk so much about mental health nowadays in the news, even pre-pandemic. But certainly once the pandemic hit, the discussion about what was happening in people's lives became even more important. And that certainly is a blend of good news and bad news, that discussion is in fact taking place. And tonight we want to get a very interesting perspective, that of former Broncos quarterback Ryan Griese, and he joins us now. Of course, Brian's spent 5 years quarterbacking the Denver Broncos after growing up under the Hall of Fame quarterback Bob Griese of the Miami Dolphins and his mom Judy. And a lot of Brian's story comes from that family experience. Brian, it's great to see you again. I know you have a lot you want to let people know about, so I'll just turn it over to you.
Yeah, Tom, thank you very much. And thank you for being here and moderating this tonight. I think, first off, I just want to say thank you to Gold Crown Foundation. I've been a supporter of Gold Crown Foundation. Our family has participated in the basketball camps. My son has been in the basketball camps and had a great time. But I've known Ray Baker and Bill Hanslick for over 20 years, and can't say how much respect I have for those two individuals and the way that they dedicate their time, energy, and passion to this organization and the difference that they're making in our community here in Denver. From a sports standpoint has been unparalleled. And I love this health huddle. I know it's a new initiative for Gold Crown Foundation, and I think it's a great way for us to talk with our young kids, parents, and our entire community about the importance of mental health and how it integrates with sports in general. So I'm happy to be here tonight and look forward to the conversation.
I want to, Brian, because I think people, certainly local football fans would say, there really is nothing about mental health they wanted to discuss. The idea was whatever happened, tough it out. And I think that door is now open for everyone from professional athletes down to anyone in society, that if you are struggling, if you sense you're struggling, or if you know someone who is struggling, there are avenues that you can travel where you can get help. And more often than not, there are people who need help.
Yeah, I think there's no question, Tom. I think mental health is health in general, right? We talk a lot about our physical health, and especially in sports and at all levels of sports, from Pee Wee leagues through high school and into college and the NFL. How healthy you are physically has a direct correlation to how well you're going to perform on the field. And now mental health is becoming as important, if not more important, in your overall health. And so I think from a sports standpoint, we are seeing the sea change coming, and rightfully so. And I think it starts in our youth leagues, in the Gold Crown leagues, for instance. I think for all of you parents and kids that are watching tonight, I think it's important that we pay attention to how we're feeling. I think it's important that we open up the conversation with our kids and our families as to maybe it's not posed in mental health around the dinner table, but with an 8, 9, 10-year-old, it's about how are you feeling? And it's about true connection, right? It's not just about, hey, how was your day? And then we're on to, watching the Nuggets game, although we all love to watch Hanslick and his pregame shows and all those things. But true connection. No, how are you really feeling? How are you really doing in school? How are you really doing with your relationships at school? How are you really doing during this pandemic? And creating space for true connection with our kids and with our families. I think that's the first step. And it happens with this age group that we're talking with tonight.
You as a young man, as a teenager, had to go through and experience the death of your mom. And it certainly had an impact, as it would with anyone, as a teenager, managing that. Teenagers now are challenged in many other ways. But before we talk about the present and what teenagers face, talk a bit about your teenage years and how you were able to navigate the most difficult of times.
Yeah, Tom, I was 7 years old when my mom was diagnosed with breast cancer. She fought the disease for 5 years. Ultimately, she died when I was 12 years old from that cancer. And I remember feeling like I was the only 12-year-old boy in the world that had just lost his mom. I felt very alone. I had two older brothers that had gone away to college. My dad, for his job, was on the road every weekend during the football season. And so I didn't really have a whole lot of people that I could turn to talk about how I was feeling. And for the kids and parents that are watching tonight, that's probably the biggest challenge, is that when our children feel like they're alone with something, and alone with something really difficult. The pandemic has isolated us in a lot of these ways, and isolated our kids because they're not with their peer group. They're at home. And so when I felt alone and I was dealing with, anger that my mom had been taken away from me, I was angry at society for not being able to cure cancer. Probably most dangerous, I was angry at myself for not being a better son in those 12 years and not having a chance to go back and fix that. And I knew I was going to have to live with that for the rest of my life. And so all those feelings and emotions that are normal, natural grief responses, I didn't have an outlet. And so I internalized all of those. And it really began to form who I am as a person, and it began to affect my relationships, or my ability to trust relationships, or more in particular. And I think that's something that we all deal with. And a lot of kids, at this stage from adolescence, begin to trust relationships and see the importance of relationships and communicating. And so I developed, my coping strategies were not positive. I didn't depend on anybody else when I got into an adverse situation, because that's all I knew. And so when I went on to college and later professional football, it still impacted me. What I experienced when I was 12 years old, and my inability to deal with that and to go pass through those emotions in a healthy manner and build coping skills to deal with that adversity, affected me for 25 years after that event. So it was still the most impactful and seminal moment in my life, as far as how I developed. And I think that our kids today are going through all kinds of adversities. Grief and loss is just one example. There's all kinds of adversities that our kids are going through right now. And I think talking about it and addressing it and building coping skills in our kids is what I'm really passionate about, and what I've dedicated my life to with Brooke, my wife, to helping kids find those coping skills that I never had.
I was going to ask you, because now as a parent, I mean, this has become such a big part of everyone's life, whether it's via a phone or a computer, that kids now have so much of their connection with the outside world. Sometimes in this individual space, just in their head, they deal with the screen, and that becomes where they get their information, which is valuable and possibly toxic. It runs the whole gamut. So now as a parent, you reflect on your childhood and try to manage your mental health, and you said it was not a success for many years. Now as a parent, it's difficult sometimes to break through this wall and connect with what they're seeing, what they're hearing, what they're feeling, and also being able to cope with it.
Yeah, Tom, it is the challenge of this generation, is how do we stay connected, not through your phone, but like face to face, and have those interactions. And you're right. I've got a 15-year-old and a 12-year-old. And, I think there's a lot of positives that come out of having, the connectivity that they currently have. I remember when I used to, prepare to write a term paper, I had to go get the Encyclopedia Britannica, like that's how old I am.
No Google. Yeah.
All of the information and the connectivity is there for kids. I think as parents, we need to be really intentional about how we maintain what I was saying before, that true connection. And I think a couple of things that we try to do within our family is I try to model behavior. And so if I'm not feeling great one day, or if I'm stressed, or if I'm having a tough negotiation in my part of my life, I don't hide that from my kids. I tell them, I communicate about, hey, today was a really stressful day, and here's why, and here's how it makes me feel. So it's not taboo. It's not a sign of weakness. If I listen, I don't feel like 100% today. I'll even use sometimes, you've used the words, I feel a little depressed today. And here's why, guys. This didn't go in my direction, or I didn't have an opportunity to do this opportunity. So I think modeling behaviors for our kids so that when they deal with adversity, they know that it's safe to come to you, that you are the person I'm going to come to with hard things, right? I'm not going to try to go to a friend or try to just stuff it like I did. When I have something hard and I'm 13 years old, I'm coming to mom and dad because I know they're safe, because they've modeled that behavior for me. And that, for me, that's like number one parenting in all the stressors of today. And then number two is creating space to have conversation. It's not good enough excuse to say I'm busy and I'm going to go to your soccer game. And by going to your soccer game, I'm checking the box of being a good parent. And like, that's not good enough. We have to create space to have communication and real connection. And I think that could be around the dinner table. Every kid is different. I know, so my son, he wakes up early, he goes to bed early, and he doesn't want to talk in front of other people about some of these things. We had to have the birds and the bees conversation. That wasn't really comfortable. So like those kinds of things, I'll invite him to go on a hike. So we have 2-3 hours where we're hiking and we can talk about things. My daughter's a night owl, so she won't talk to us about anything at the dinner table. You got to do it at night when she's ready to talk. So as parents, let's not make it on our schedule that we have some of these conversations, but be there when the kids are ready to have those conversations. So those are two things that, we as a family try to do to create space to have conversation about what we're struggling with feelings wise and mental health.
It's interesting because you think of, same as in sports, you think of all the abilities. The key one many times is availability. And if you are available both emotionally and as far as what you're talking about on the clock, and you are willing to expose yourself to them, they're more likely to expose themselves to you as well, and know that that's a safe and trusting environment. And that's going to be a huge step forward for many.
Yeah, and it's, I think we're trying to model openness is what we're really trying to boil this down to, is that as parents, we are not mental health experts, but we are experts with respect to our kids and how they feel and act and some of their emotions. And so we are the first line of defense to have conversation about how we're feeling. And if we model that openness, I think that will take us light years, because that's not where we have been. Mental health has not been something that we talk openly about as families enough. And I think enough is enough. I think it's time to have those conversations and to realize that there is no taboo, that this is health in general. And we worry about getting our kids to the doctor for their well checks. When they break their arm, we take them to the doctor. And this is preventive. It's really preventive mental health. And if we can do that, I think we're all going to be in a much better place.
How do you look at stress for parents? Because obviously they too now live, it seems like everyone's, the environment we all live in is more pressurized nowadays. And to be honest, as much as we'd like to be better parents to teenagers and kids in general, kids can also create stress for parents. So about making sure that you as a parent are staying mentally healthy is something that I think, whether you have a spousal relationship or whether it's you as an individual, that's going to be a core value for you. You have to be healthy enough to help your kids manage it as well.
Yeah, I don't know what you're talking about, Tom. My kids don't create any stress for me.
No.
No, it's listen. Nobody has the right answer. Nobody is perfect, and I think that we all have to come into this with a little bit of humility from the jump. and realizing that we're all learning. Kids are learning how to be kids. We're learning how to be parents. And some days are better than others. And listen, I am culprit number one when it comes to some days there's a lot of stress and your fuse is short. And those things are going to happen. You're going to say things that you don't mean all the time. But I do think if you approach it from a standpoint of humility, you're able to apologize when you're wrong as a parent, right? Because we're not right all the time. And sometimes we'll say things that we don't mean, but they just happen because of the stress of a situation. Or you're worried about, like when I'm driving and the kids are in the back, and that's stressful because you're trying to keep them safe, or they're around the dinner table and you're making dinner and there's a hot pan and they're, playing around and somebody can get hurt. That's stressful. And sometimes you react. And I do that myself. What I've found that just helps me is if I am able to say, kids, I'm sorry, that I should not have said that, and I was wrong to burst like that, then not only does it model a behavior for them that, you know what, nobody's perfect. I don't need to be perfect, because I think a lot of our kids nowadays are feeling like they do have to be perfect. I got to be perfect in school to get into this and that college. I got to be perfect in sports to get this scholarship. There's too much of that stress on our kids. So if we can model that we're not going to be perfect and we're going to be accountable when we make a mistake, then our kids will realize it's okay to make mistakes and to learn from those mistakes, right? And that's failing forward. We talk about that a lot. Give our kids the opportunity to fail so that they can grow from that opportunity and not try to be so perfect. And so for me, just a simple act of apologizing has allowed us to have a conversation about that and go in that direction.
And so many people, you've lived it in sports, so you learn a lot more from failure than you do from success. It's a hard way to learn, but it is one that is in fact teaching us. I wanted to ask you about how you would communicate with a young Brian Griese. What you would ask or tell a 15-year-old Brian Griese who was struggling, as you detailed, but also try to modernize it a bit, because I think a 15-year-old now faces twice the challenge that 15-year-olds when I grew up, or maybe even when you grew up, faced. It's definitely harder right now to be a kid, especially a teenager.
There's no question. And, I don't need to make this up. I have these conversations with my 15-year-old, right? And my 12-year-old. I think a lot of what we've been talking about is centered around some of the conversations that I have with them, just around not piling so much pressure on yourself. That there are going to be times. I just came from a ninth grade soccer game, and my daughter was stressed out about if I let one goal in, we're going to lose the game, and just there's anxiety that builds up, right? We want kids to have nerves, right? Because nerves are good, especially playing sports or doing anything. If you're nervous, that it's telling you that it means something to you, which is a great thing, right? I got nervous before every single game I ever played in my life. And I learned how to manage that, and I learned how to use that energy, not in a negative way, but in a positive way. And so I think, for our kids now, it's let's embrace how we feel around the nerves and not let that go to a point of anxiety. And so a lot of kids have anxiety, and that's a natural response. I'm not saying that that's not a natural response, but I think we have to have conversation about, why are you anxious? What is the root of this? And if I was talking to, the 15-year-old Brian, I would say, listen, you don't have to do this all on your own. There are people out there that care about you, that want to help. You just have to be okay opening up and having that conversation. And those adults back then, I would tell them, you need to be more present to Brian. He needs you, and you need to create the space and create a safe space for him to open up to you. That's your job as an adult. That's our job now. That hasn't changed. And yes, it's harder to be 15 now than it was back then. I would also say that there's so many more opportunities for our kids, and so many wonderful things that they can get involved in and get interested in, that there's also a lot of positives about living now.
It's interesting because you think about trying to see someone who is struggling. And I think Kevin Love wrote a brilliant article talking about dealing with depression and anxiety a couple of years ago. And he is a professional basketball player who's been at the very top of the game. And he wrote, and fundamentally the message was everybody's going through something. So you may not see it in someone else. Someone may say, oh, Brian Griese, I mean, he was a star college quarterback, a long pro career, Monday Night Football, but nobody's immune. Nobody is life is easy. Everyone has a tough time. How they're managing it, that's not something you necessarily will see cosmetically. So that availability that you talked about, whether it be parents or friends or coworkers, is really important. Pay attention, to listen, to ask how people.
Yeah, and I think it's how many times we walk by our coworkers or our friends and say, "Hey, how you doing?" And do we really want a response? It's just a greeting, and I know that everybody's busy, like I said, but I do think we can all benefit from truly asking. No, I really want to know how you're doing, and it can be as simple as that, and learning how to listen. And being genuine in the interest in how everybody's doing. And then I think giving people around us the benefit of the doubt, because if you believe what Kevin Love said, and I truly believe it, we're all dealing with something. Nobody's life is perfect. And we're all having to overcome trials and tribulations, some much greater than others. I know that. But if we can look at our neighbor and understand that they're going through something, I don't know what it is, and you give them the benefit of the doubt, that maybe, if the mailman comes to the door and the mail was late that day, maybe he had something going on. And if we come out and yell at him or say, "Hey man, what's going on?" I just don't think that's a great way to live. And I think if we can multiply that by everybody we see on a daily basis, we're going to be much more receptive to positive mental health in everybody.
I want to ask you about mental health related to Judys House. When you started the program, clearly it was dedicated to your mom after her passing, but there's a lot there, and it includes mental health. So tell us a bit about Judys House and how that works.
Yeah. So just a quick story about how we started it. I mentioned that I kind of built up these walls around myself after I went through grief and didn't really have anyone to talk to about it. And those walls got bigger and bigger as I went through high school, college, and then I came to Denver to play for the Broncos and follow John Elway. And everybody wanted to know everything about Brian Griese and the new Broncos quarterback. And, the first year that I started playing didn't go so great, right? We started 0-4 after winning the Super Bowl. We ended up with a 6-10 season. And so there were a lot of unhappy folks. And I felt that. I felt it anytime I left my house. I felt it when I had to do interviews. I felt it eating dinner with my girlfriend at the time. And that just made it worse, and who was I going to talk to about being the Broncos quarterback and being the heir apparent to John Elway? There weren't a lot of people to talk to about that. And it was at that moment, Tom, that thankfully my future wife at the time, Brooke, who's a child psychologist, she was getting her PhD at the University of Colorado, and she saw in me this sadness behind my eyes, and she could tell that there was something not right. And I think nowadays as parents, we can see that in our kids at times, just a little glimmer. And I wasn't going to offer up to her that I was struggling with all these things. But she sensed it, and she said, and so she was the one that helped me through this process. And I'll tell you to this day, Tom, that I never dealt with the loss of my mom in a healthy fashion until the day we started Judys House. And Judys House and service to give back in meaning of my mom who died way too young. The act of service was my coping tool, was my coping skill that I had to develop. And so it really started as an extension of my grief process. And that was 20 years ago. And it started that way. But now, after 20 years, it's an organization that works with and helps bereaved children and their families on an everyday basis. And it's what I wanted to have when I was 12 going through it. And I wanted to have a safe place where I could go to meet other kids that were going through the same thing that I was, to know that I was not the only one. Baseline. I just wanted to know I wasn't the only one. And then to be able to share my story and to be able to listen to other kids' stories and to respect each other in that group, and to go through this process of grief together, and to learn some coping skills, some positive coping mechanisms to help each other get through it together. And that's what Judys House is. And, you know, so it's obviously it's a passion of mine, but it was also critical for me. I am example number one as to why addressing mental health is an important thing, because it affected every relationship and every part of my life until I began to address it with a positive skill.
It's amazing to hear you describe it as such. Obviously, I was working, covering the team back then, and we would see you on a daily basis, a professional football player dealing with wins and losses and good practices and bad practices. And, you wouldn't know. But when you talk about what Brooke saw in you and how Brooke was able to help you begin and process the grief that lived in you, it makes me wonder about assessing the value of that by what would have happened had you never been able to do that, had you not had someone like Brooke come into your life, or someone to be the key to unlock all that was unhappy, that was living inside of you, and what that may be going on with many people we know.
I don't think there's any question, and I don't know the answer, Tom. If I had never had the opportunity to really express and to make meaning in a positive way, but I think what we can all learn from it is it doesn't necessarily. It may not have to be a parent, right, or may not have to be a coach. I didn't have a coach in my entire sports life. I never had a coach that really took that interest in me as to how I was truly feeling. People ask me that all the time. I had a lot of coaches who told me how to do things better, but there wasn't a coach that took me aside and said, "Hey, man, I know you lost your mom. How are you doing? How are you really doing outside of football?" And so I think what we can all learn is that figure in a kid's life can be from anywhere. It doesn't necessarily have to be within the family. So we may have a coworker that we have a relationship with that coworker's child, and you might be the opportunity. You might be the person that creates a safe space for that kid to open up and to be that figure that they trust, to have one conversation. That might be all you need. But I think we all have to be more aware. And I think we have to force ourselves to be more open to those conversations and to be that difference in another person's life. That's what Brooke did for me.
Tell me about what you've seen now at Judys House in the years that it's been. The trends or things that you see as prevalent in some of the people who come there seeking and hopefully getting the help they need.
Yeah, well, all of the families and the kids that come to Judys House are grieving the loss of a loved one. That could be a mother, father, brother, or sister, close friend. And so they all have that common shared experience. I think we see kids struggling with a lot of different issues, depression, anxiety, suicidal ideation. 25% of the families that come to Judys House are survivors of suicide. So they have had a close loved one who has modeled a negative behavior to them on top of grieving. I think our young people today are under a tremendous amount of pressure and stress. And so those three things, the depression, the anxiety, and the negative coping skills that kids, unfortunately, are thinking more about suicide than they ever have before. It is an epidemic in our state, in our country. And I think we need to we're talking about mental health. This is Mental Health Awareness Month, and we're trying to have these conversations with our children and to save lives, quite frankly. And I think that as uncomfortable as having a conversation about suicide is, we need to do it more often with our kids. And that comes out of checking in with them and how they're feeling. And I think that's one of the things that we talk quite a bit about at Judys House is that it's not unnatural for a child to have a thought of suicide. It is unnatural for them to begin to have a plan. And how we address that with our kids, how we monitor with our kids, how we build healthy coping skills. I can't emphasize that enough, right? It's not enough just to say suicide is it's a bad outcome. Obviously, what are the positive coping skills that we are going to build in our kids, and what kind of scaffolding are we going to build around them to support them through that really ugly, nasty thought? So those are some of the things that we are seeing and helping to address at Judys House, but it's not just at Judys House, it's everywhere. And we all need to be more aware of it.
When you say it as such, when you talk about building a scaffolding and trying to prepare to prevent these things, it reminds me of people who are taught and learn CPR. People who will never, ever have to use it are learning CPR. They're prepared, they're ready to help, ready to treat and save lives. And in that same manner, it would be interesting to see if there was some sort of vehicle with which there was a CPR as far as mental health, specifically when you're talking about teens and suicidal ideation and things like that there was a way to interrupt that and try to, obviously, as we always say, one prevention would be great and everyone would be important. But again, we see so many people working on it. We talk about Colorado Crisis Services. You've worked with many, many different groups. And I get the feeling, as I talked about earlier, what the pandemic's done is it's created a situation where many people now are having more open discussions about mental health. And while that does make some people uncomfortable because it does appear that it's more prevalent than we used to think, it is also opening the conversation, and hopefully that's helping.
Yeah, I don't think there's any question. And I think we need to continue. That's why this is such a great forum. This Health Huddle through Gold Crown Foundation is a great way to continue to have the conversation. And more people are comfortable, coming on Zoom or wherever it might be to have these conversations. I can't stress enough the importance of face-to-face communication, especially when it comes to our kids and to our friends. I miss being in front of people. We would have events for Judys House and to have that one-on-one connection. It's just different. We're doing the best we can, but I can't wait to get back in front of people and continue to have the conversation in person.
You mentioned coaches before. I just want to ask you because, obviously with Gold Crown, we're dealing with so many people, from volunteers to coaches to referees, and every kid who gets to play, compete, and grow through Gold Crown athletics. But what about the role of the coach? You said you really, your relationships were pretty much strictly X's and O's and the like. That role is changing a little bit more. What would you tell coaches about being tuned into how those kids are feeling, performing, and your role as a coach in working with them?
Yeah, I don't think it's any different than the parent relationship. The best coaches that I had, they had that parental feel to them, and that starts with it has to be about more than sports. It has to be that you look at your role as a coach as developing these kids for the future, and not just as an athlete, but as a person, and caring about the person first. And certainly there's a lot of ways that people and kids grow and get better through athletics. And I think it's such a healthy outlet for our kids, both physically, but also being a part of a team. And that helps with isolation, right? My daughter was only going to school. She's in DPS. She was only going to school in person 2 times a week. And those were half days. But being on the basketball team, being on the soccer team gave her a sense of community and connection with her peers, which was invaluable. And so leadership and going through struggle and grit together and having to overcome a loss, all those things are so positive for our kids. I would just encourage our coaches to go one step further, to develop the person inside, and to understand and to keep tabs on how your team is doing, the individuals are doing, and how much time does it take after practice or after a game to pull one kid aside and to really ask them how they're doing. Hey, what's going on in school? How are you dealing with only 2 days in person? How does that make you feel? Is there anything I can do to help out? Those are simple things that coaches can do.
The Broncos going to get Aaron Rodgers?
That's a great question, Tom, and I'm glad we didn't lead with that, because everybody would have just left after they got this definitive answer. So right now, I would say Aaron Rodgers will only play for 2 teams, either the Packers or the Broncos.
Wow.
Okay, so I put it at 50-50 that he plays for the Packers. So there's a 50-50 shot that Aaron Rodgers could be playing for the Denver Broncos. And if that happens, Tom, despite the fact that ratings on your network are going to go through the roof, they're all going to want to know on every single moment what Aaron Rodgers is doing. If that happens, there's enough talent on the Broncos team to compete in the AFC West. They're not as good as Kansas City, but who knows? With a guy like Aaron Rodgers against Patrick Mahomes, how much fun that would be in the AFC West.
That'd be a good couple weekends, at least in the regular season, and then hopefully the Broncos would find their way back to the playoffs. Brian, it's so nice of you not only to take the time to do this, but to be so open, because you're not talking about the best times of your life. You're talking about some stuff you struggled with, but it's really important, I think, for many people to identify with that and understand that the struggles are real for everyone. We all go through them, and managing them and helping others manage them is really important. So it's just great that you're willing to be so open. What you've done with Judys House is also great, but I don't know that people understand how difficult it may be for you to open up and how valuable it is as well. So thanks.
Well, I'm happy to do it, Tom. And, my story is just one story. And you're right. Everybody is going through something. I'm really encouraged to see more higher profile athletes in our country that come out and are having conversations about what they've been through, because it's important that our young people understand that just because we're going through difficult times and may have mental health and even diagnosis as to mental health, it's not a sentence, right? There's ways that we can get through tough times together. And I think it's important that we understand it's an opportunity for grit and to work through something. We can do hard things. We can do hard things. Our kids can do hard things. They can be resilient and bounce back if we give them that resilience. And so people like Hayden Hurst, right? Freddie Freeman with the Braves, I saw him. He lost his mom when he was young. Had a great story. Brandon Marshall, who played here with Denver, has been a great spokesperson after being diagnosed with bipolar disorder. So I'm so encouraged to see more and more higher profile athletes tell their story, because that's going to help with our young people.
Well, it's great of you to do it. And we really appreciate people joining us. I didn't see any questions in the chat. I know if people had the opportunity, they might have some, but certainly we can work a way where we can reach out to Gold Crown and we can get this conversation to continue. But again, thanks, as you pointed out, to Ray Baker and Bill Hanslick and everyone at Gold Crown for what they've been doing for years and years now. And there's a survey as well that you can see in the link in the chat. That is something that we'd love to have you fill out, give us some feedback on what this did or wasn't able to accomplish for you. We just want your honest feedback to let us know what you think about this mental health chance to chat. And Megan, I just want to turn it back to you and also thank you for having me. It was great to be a part of this, and it's always a pleasure to chat with Brian, but hopefully this is something that may help others as well.
Thank you, Tom. You're the best, bud.
Thank you both. That was
Thanks,
a great,
Brian.
Honest discussion, and I hope everybody got a lot out of it as well. I am going to share my screen real quick and just show a couple resources, maybe. It's working. Well, we are having technical difficulties, but I will link in the chat just a link to our mental health page as well. So if you need any other additional resources in addition to Colorado Crisis Services, if you know somebody, there's a lot of great organizations on there that you guys can get help with or refer anybody to. But with that being said, I think that's all we have for tonight. We'll send a follow-up email tomorrow and have this recording also available if anybody wants to share it. But other than that, thank you for joining us. And if any questions come up, feel free to just send an email to that healthhuddle@goldcrownfoundation.com. So thanks, Tom. Thanks, Brian. Thanks, everybody.
Have a great night, everybody.
I really appreciate it.
Go Nuggets. And Avs.